Hello, everyone, and welcome again. I am here with Ian, and he is going to tell us a little bit more about his current research. So, Ian, what is your research topic?
So, one, thanks for putting this on, Jess. It's very interesting. I think it's good to get people talking about their research topics because it gets everybody flowing and gets the creative thought processes going. Kind of reminds me of ResearchGate that everybody can get into and look at things. So this main research project I'm working on right now, kind of outside of classwork, is stemming from some of my interests that came up. As I'm looking at dissertation topics, sub conflict paradigms underneath. So the topic itself is a subset of some of those things, but what I really wanted to look at is third-party interventionists from a state perspective, UN type perspective, into conflict states. And look at some of their interactions with the local populace, and we see a lot of these, reactions, or we see a lot of these strategies, for helping to either be, keep the peace, make the peace, or transform the peace, aren't necessarily working, or they're taking a very long time. So I wanted to try and match that up to, actual concepts of time or temporality. So the research topic itself is looking at how, when these third party interventionists come into conflict states, they come in with a certain static, temporal, world view. They're looking at it as a conflict in one state in time. They do see it as changing, but the strategies don't change well with it. Whereas the populations of those countries, they're having that time paradigm, that time worldview put on top of them. Because if they want to, get aid or things like that, they have to see things from the interventionist perspective. And then at the same time, they have their own temporal worldview perspectives that are continuously changing and moving on their own axes. So what I'm doing is I'm taking those two, juxtaposing them, and seeing where there are differences or issues within that, and how that may lead to different types of intractable conflict.
So, that seems really interesting, and you kind of already touched on your interest in it, but how exactly did you become interested in this topic?
It's interesting, and I know we were talking about Dr. Zanko just prior to this, but I was doing a paper for her, one of her classes, and I stumbled upon this idea of phase transitions, and I won't get into that, although an interesting topic. And she and I got talking about it. I'm like, well, this idea of time is an interesting thing when it comes to conflict, because we talk about it so very much. You see things differently than I do. Time moves differently when you're in conflict. Things like that. Different cultures see time differently. But then when I got into the actual research on conflict itself and look at some of the main authors regarding temporality, they didn't get into conflict, or they just barely touched it. And then conflict analysts, peacemakers, things like that, they mention it, but they don't dig down philosophically into it. So Dr. Zanko turned me on to a couple different resources, and I really found it interesting, the philosophical application of time with some different physics models, primarily just to help with sense making, into conflict itself. So basically, it started as a discussion. I found it very interesting. Listened to some podcasts on it, and then I've found my brain really likes playing around with it, so I've kept going with it.
That's awesome. So, and another question is, what type of research methodology will you or are you using with this research right now?
So at this point, like I said, it's kind of a preamble to dissertation, or to my larger study that I want to work on. So at this point, I'm doing case study. There's going to be two different case studies, using Niger as a case study, and then I'm using Democratic Republic of the Congo as two different cases. Has one been a little more successful than the other one? I.e., Niger was a little bit more successful of a case, where you see the UN interventionists were able to actually get disparaging groups to actually find those subordinate goals and actually sign peace treaties amongst them that are still holding to this day. Whereas in Democratic Republic Congo, you don't see that. You see the UN mission has largely been, don't take it the wrong way, but it's been largely ineffective, because of various different reasons. But how it's lots of Latin American interveners came into or were put on that mission. So you've got completely different ways of viewing the world. Trying to impart a strategy and peacemaking and peacekeeping upon a society that views the world in a completely different manner. So case studies is the main way now, and obviously the methodology will change working on the larger study where I'll get into more phenomenological.
It's really nice that you have a study that is growing with you. I think that's really important, especially for a lot of students, because it's the evolution of research that you're really showing. And with that, my last question is, how do you think your topic will impact the field of conflict resolution?
That's actually been not the hardest part for me about the project, but the one that's taken the most work because like I said, it's philosophical, and philosophical is great. We can have chats like this. Go grab coffee, go to conferences, go to symposia, and we can chat all day long about this. But what are practitioners actually going to do with this? And where I see this going is one, building an actual model out of it, or adding this covariant into a model that of actually one of Dr. Zanko's counterparts built. And I won't get too much into that right now, but if we can figure out how these time differences impact conflict and conflict resolution, it will help affect changing strategies. So by taking that variable and that understanding, instead of looking at it philosophically, putting it into that model as an actual variable that can change, that you can move around. They call it Bayesian dynamics, or things that move. And like you said, a growing study. Well, this is actually a growing variable that can change through time. It will help practitioners understand the ecosystem, the conflict ecosystem they're getting into, and then help them with the strategies that they're building. So I guess to sum that up, because I kind of rambled there, just a piece of a model is where I see this going.
Okay, I think that's awesome because then you can further contribute with the model later on. So I
Right.
really like that you've got your foot in the door with this and you're really rocking and rolling and showing the evolution of research. I just want to say thank you for taking your time to have this quick interview. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you again this fall, hopefully in
Sounds,
person.
yeah, definitely in person this time. Thanks, Jess. I appreciate it.
Welcome.